Hey, hello. It's Chris with Nerd Alert Comics here, making a little different video, taking it outside. Maybe a little different than what you see other comics people do. I'm here to talk about mistakes I've made in collecting, and I'm hoping some of this discussion will save you time and lots of money down the road.
Nerd alert!
So, the first one I want to talk about is putting labels on the front of your comics. Many years ago, I was involved in a good number of comic sales, and as part of that, bought little round sticky labels to put on the front of the comics and put a price on there. Didn't write the price on the comic while it was on there. Wrote it on the sheet before peeling it off, putting it on. Thought everything would be fine. Many hundreds of comics I did this to. Now I'm also in the practice, or I was in the practice, of stacking my comics horizontally. And a lot of that was just because of space concerns. I didn't have a lot of space to store them. Otherwise, if they stack long boxes on the end, was taking up less space. So years later, going through my comics, and started to note that there's a little depression in the cover of the comic where that label was. This might seem matter of fact, or if you run into this in other places, but I have hundreds of comics with these little depressions on them now. So anything that I need to send in, I'm going to have to get pressed, or probably have to learn how to press myself. It's not something I've done before. So I would recommend, do not put labels on the front of your comics. I also have found, though, when I buy them from places, I don't want to pick out certain shops, but there's certain pretty big online sellers that put labels smack dab right on the front of the comic. And it's not a good practice. And I've noted that when I opened it up, there was a tiny depression where that label was, even though this comic was claimed to be a mint or near mint copy. So they'll ding you for that at CGC, and it's not something that's readily able to be seen. I should be inserting a video here that shows in some lighting how you can see it, but avoid doing that. Don't put any labels on the front of your comics, and even if you put them on the back of the comic in front, you might have some issues with depression that way too. Another thing is, don't pack them very tightly and store them vertically. The number two mistake, I think that would be wise to avoid, is don't shortchange your bags and boards. Now it depends on what you're in the running for. If you're doing long-term collecting and you love the hobby and you're going to keep your comics for a while, look at Mylar, look at acid-free boards. I started collecting or buying in the 70s, and back then you only had polyethylene and other oil-based bags, and I noted over the years that they start to get sticky. I've had occasions where I had a comic stored outside a bag in a stack, and a bunch, especially I remember the Burn run of Fantastic Four, and those were in some bags that actually felt a little oily. And when I took them out, I could see that white covers had gotten just a slight creamy tinge where the bag was touching them. And so these things eventually start to destroy your comics. They really will. I mean, I've talked to comic shops about it, and they kind of just say, well, Mylar's expensive. Don't, these bags are fine. You got to change them once in a while. Well, who's going to remember to change a comic bag after 10 years? And if you look at the cost of Mylar, realistically, just go out and price 1,000 Mylar bags from, one of the vendors that has it. I use eGerber, but I don't know if they're any better than others, but I'm very happy with them. I think 1,000 Mylar bags, 2 mils, half, 2 mils with the flap, are probably like $200 shipped, or maybe a little bit more for 1,000. So that's 20 cents. That's 22 cents a comic. Now, when I started collecting comics for 25 cents a piece, So if you could transport me back then and you'd say, hey, do you want to put Mylar? That'd double the price of my comics. That'd be crazy. But now your comics are $3.99, you know, and then you're buying stuff off of the net, and it's a lot more expensive. It's just worth it. Just do it. You'll be happy, especially if you're in this for the long term, you know, years down the road. I'm very happy to have done it now. Everything that as I go through my collection, anything I touch that has the old bags or boards, I will replace now. So I urge you to do that. The third thing I'd like to talk about is tape. You don't hear discussion about this, but really just take a moment. You might not change your mind, but think about why are we using tape? Yeah, it keeps the flap down, but a lot of times you can fold it or crease it. It adds a little ridge, and then you just add that chance. When you open it up, you're stressing the comic, depending on how the tape is on there. You're putting an extremely damaging material next to very valuable things. It's just kind of insane when you think about it. So I would urge you to think about whether you really want to use tape with your comics. I think that's something worth really thinking about. I know with my Mylar bags, folding over the flap is sufficient. Sometimes I'll tuck them in, but I don't use tape to tape down the flaps of my comics anymore. And so I think you double think that. I know people use painter's tape a lot of times because it is easier to peel up, and you know, great, whatever adjustments you want to make. But I really think you should just give a thought to it, because it's very rare that I've had tape stick to a comic, because you know, over the years I've gotten good at extracting comics from tape bags. But you know, there's that one time, could cost you literally thousands of dollars if something bad happened. So those are tips for you, hopefully. If you take them to heart and you think about them and avoid doing some of this stuff, you'll save some time and money. So there's one more thing I do want to discuss. I haven't made a lot of videos, and I don't do them often. Been very busy with different things. But I want to clue anyone watching these videos in. I have a potential spec book. I think it's going to be more interesting than valuable. And I don't want to reveal what it is yet, because it's a comic that has something about it that is not recognized by CGC or by Overstreet, but I think it would put some extra value on it once it's recognized. So I mean, this falls in the category of things like, is it a first appearance, is it an origin, is it some printing mistake, you know, those types of things. I'm just saying there's something about it that hasn't been recognized by CGC or by Overstreet that will give it extra value, I believe. Or at least it'll be interesting to see. Basically what I'm planning to do is take one issue of this comic, send it into CGC, and point out the aspect of it that is unusual, and see if they'll recognize it on the label. And if they won't, well, maybe I'll send a little note into Overstreet. But I want to put this at the end of the video for those who have taken the trouble to watch it. And I'll keep, you know, kind of laying out whatever I find out as I go along on this little journey. So hopefully in the next weeks I'll get a book together and send it into CGC with the note attached, and we'll see if they'll recognize this interesting aspect of this comic. And if they do, I'll let you know.